Hi, Andy.
Today we're going to be talking about franchise agreements, and what I want to do is to find a bit more about what they actually are, what a franchise agreement actually is, and when it's used in business, and maybe some of the pitfalls as well.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. Quite a lot of things to cover there. I think ultimately a franchise agreement is an agreement between two parties where you have a party that has an established brand, whatever that might be. It might be McDonald's, it might be one of many different things. It might be Avon, might even be Virgin. A lot of the Virgin shops and businesses are actually franchised out using the Virgin brand. And under a franchise agreement, a franchisor, the people that own the brand, pass to a franchisee, that's you wanting to use the brand and run the business, rights to do that, to run the business. The reason they're quite interesting, and the reason you have to be quite careful with them, is generally speaking, there are a lot of rules attached within the standard franchise agreement used by the franchisor. Lots of rules and regulations that state how you will have to run your business using their brand. And a lot of people don't realise that.
Right. So, I mean, we talked about things like McDonald's, and McDonald's are obviously the biggest people out there, so they're going to have some pretty standard contracts and things like that. But there's also a lot of smaller companies out there who like the concept of the franchise model, because it seems like it could be easy cash, I guess, for some businesses who have got a structure to their business and they're selling their structure on, aren't they?
Yeah, I suppose the great advantage of entering into a franchise is that essentially you don't have to establish your brand. A franchise agreement should essentially say, right, this is going to run for a certain period of time, a term, say 5 years, and we are not going to allow any other franchises of our brand to exist in a set area that you'll agree with them. So you might have a town or half a town. If it's a very popular franchise, you might just get a couple of roads before the next one. And it'll say, this is your patch, essentially, and you can run that business from there. And that all sounds like a fabulous thing. But as I say, the downside is that, of course, you're constantly paying for the use of that brand. So where it may take you 3, 4, 5 years to establish your own brand, you could, under a franchise agreement that keeps renewing, still be paying in 30 years' time for use of the brand. But you pay towards it. If you're selling burgers, we keep using that example, you'll have to make the burgers in a certain way, and you'll only be able to offer certain types of burger. So if, for some reason, you thought that something might be popular amongst your customers, well, you wouldn't necessarily be able to add that to your menu. You would be restricted. Some people like that. They like the fact that there are set rules. This is what you do. This is how you run your business. And this is how it works. And they like having the assistance of the big franchisor over them. But there are pitfalls and issues which come with that.
So what's the protection? I mean, we talk about the pitfalls and some of the issues that are that go along with franchise agreements. Obviously, the franchise agreement is sort of weighted for the franchisor rather than the franchisee. So is there some protection that you can put in place, or can you make changes to the agreements?
Yeah, okay, so let's think about the agreements themselves. In actual fact, you have to get right into the whole process of taking a franchise, because what seems to be the process is you express an interest in running the franchise. Maybe you respond to an advert saying, we want to establish something in this area. Could you be the person to do it with us? You'll then go along to something, see a presentation. You'll probably be signed up pretty quickly. And by the time you even think about taking legal advice, you may have already attended the first training session, paid anything up to £10,000, and have been essentially told that there will be a franchise agreement prepared for you for an additional legal fee at their end, which will probably run to a couple of thousand, but we don't accept any amendments to it, so you may or may not want to take legal advice. And if you do decide to take legal advice and you are essentially ask a solicitor to look at that agreement for you, what you're going to find is there are lots of things in there that you don't necessarily like. and you're going to find that your solicitor, if they're being sensible, I would say, is going to say to you, look, we can probably only change 3 or 4 of the 15 items identified that you don't like. So which of those do you want us to concentrate on? So ultimately, you're not going to end up with a document which necessarily protects you quite as far as you would like it to, and you have to make compromises. And the compromises are all to do with being able to run your own business. So what sort of things might appear in a franchise agreement? Well, if you want to hire a manager to assist you to run the business, because presumably you don't want to be running your McDonald's store 24 hours, 7 days a week, what you will find is you need to have a manager that is approved and trained by the franchisor. And if they don't like the one you've put forward, they won't let you employ that person. Let's say you've got a 5-year term on your franchise agreement. Well, you'd hope that if you hadn't breached the agreement and you turned in some reasonable profits, that there will be some automatic right to renew for another 5 years, because essentially you're establishing that business in the area that you've been granted the franchise over. But quite often they can quite happily give the franchise to someone else if they want to, and there's no protection for you. And ultimately, it can feel like, I think, as a franchisee, someone running a franchise, and it doesn't matter whether it's McDonald's or much smaller franchise arrangements, it can feel a little bit like you're bearing all of the risk of the business failing and all of the cost of setting up the business, but in actual fact, you never really feel like you own it, and you have issues. Let's say you want to expand premises and take a 10-year loan from the bank to cover the cost of that.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got 4 years left on your franchise agreement and no right to automatically renew it, provided you've worked within the terms of that agreement properly, what bank is going to lend you over a 10-year period? And that restricts what you can do with your business and how you can expand it.
So there's obviously these issues. You say that you might have, say, I don't know, 10 or 15 different things that you might like to change. And what you're saying is that there's a tipping point with any agreement, with any franchisor, where you could go in and maybe change maybe 3, 4 or 5 of them quite happily, and they'll accept that. But if you start changing too much of it, they will just say that we don't want you as a franchisee.
Yes, and sorry, we think we need to part ways. And by the way, you're not going to get your initial payment or your training fee that you made to us a few weeks ago before you spoke to the solicitor back. That's lost. I think ultimately what we're getting at is, and this is the key, if you take one thing, I suppose, from this, if you are thinking of entering into a franchise agreement, before you hand any money over or you make any commitment to hand any money over, it is essential that you obtain a copy of their standard form of franchise agreement and you have a solicitor look at it. And the reason for that is it increases your ability to make changes to it, and also it would enable you to walk away.